Ready to get started. Our last speaker of the day just came in, so we are all together and would love you to get your cup of coffee and get seated so that we can begin. I know the parking is challenging for some people, so we started a little bit late, so thank you for bearing with us. And it's great to see you. It's great to see all of you. My name is Jillian Grable. I am the organizer of this year's symposium, and last year's symposium as well. We've had a total of 4. I'm with the Institute on Human Development and Disability here at the University of Georgia, and I will say IHD Dean afterwards because Institute on Human Development and Disability takes quite a long time to say. We are the co-sponsors of this event with the Richard B. Russell Library, which is the library we're in right now. We're thrilled that you chose to spend your day here because we realize there's lots of competing commitments on your time, and for some of you it took an extraordinary effort to get here. How many of you have stood in line to vote this year already? Wonderful. Want to give yourselves an applause. So I encourage the rest of you to take someone to vote with you when you vote if you haven't already. It's a wonderful, commitment to our community to be able to vote. And I wanted to acknowledge, before going any further, the incredible team that helped plan this symposium. I would like all planning committee members to raise their hands, group facilitators, students, staff, all of you to raise your hands because there's many of you. The funders for this event are the Institute on Human Development and Disability, the Richard B. Russell Library, the Georgia Advocacy Office, Easter Seals of Southwest Georgia, and funds donated through Ann Montgomery Holtwanger. So thank you, funders, for making this day possible. I'd like to introduce Dr. Zoe Stoneman, who's standing at the door there. Zoe is the director of the Institute on Human Development and Disability and did an amazing logistical job along with the rest of the staff to make this event happen. So thank you. Power of introductions. I have a colleague that I've known for many years who's going to help me make introductions today, and her name is Sally Carter, and she's sitting right over here. We did not coordinate colors this morning, it just happened that we both are in the same color. Sally, for over 40 years in Georgia, many of you know, has had an impeccable commitment, really, to restoring the dignity of people with disabilities by working with a system of services and the power structures to free people to get a good life, a bigger life in their community, and to come home and belong. So I'm honored to have you, Sally, with me to make introductions throughout the day. So this symposium is about a lot of things. It's about the fact that people matter, that it's good to slow down long enough to listen. That matters. Words matters. How we speak with one another matters. Stories matter. They tell us what's real, and stories fuel us to get power to take action together. This symposium features stories of people who had become invisible, who came home. Stories of apologies for deep harm. Stories of people who never came home. Stories from a new young American citizen. Stories and poems from self-advocates and citizen advocates, and stories of call to action and an opportunity to share your stories. It's now my deep honor to introduce Cheryl Voigt, the director of this library. Cheryl's enthusiastically supported over 5 years the creation of not only the Georgia Disability History Alliance and the development of the last 4 symposiums, But Cheryl also, and these are some pictures of Cheryl at Central State Hospital. We were there a couple of weeks ago. Cheryl's grandmother, Jenny Raphael Williams, here, born in 1899, was sent away to Central State Hospital at the age of 35, and she lived there for 55 years until she died. Cheryl and her family visited faithfully over 55 years, Jenny, and brought her home for visits. And I have the honor of writing Jenny's story with Cheryl, her granddaughter, and great-granddaughters, many other family members. And this is Jenny in front of Central State. We are learning more about Jenny and the life she lived there, and also her hopes and dreams. So thank you, Cheryl, for allowing me to write the story with you, and I introduce you.
Is this on? Okay. Yes. It is on? Okay. I'll have to say that the discovering my grandmother is discovering her in a very different way through this book project. And I really do thank Jillian for the interest she has taken in this project. And she's really had to nudge me along just because I'm really busy at this part in my life. But every time we get together, it's just such a joy. And I'm not the only one in the family. Two of my younger cousins have also joined us in writing the story about my grandmother and rediscovering her and really knowing her in a very different way from the way we engaged with her when we were growing up. So that's really just been a great treasure to be able to do this. So anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Special Collections Libraries this morning. The Russell Building is home to 3 of the University of Georgia's Special Collections Libraries, the Hargret Rare Book and Manuscript Library, the Richard B. Russell Library for Political Research and Studies, and the Walter J. Brown Media Archive, and Peabody Awards Collection. While you're here, I hope you'll take an opportunity to look at the galleries which are on this floor. And please sign up at the registration desk if you would like to have a special tour to our high-density vault. This afternoon, we'll do those around 3:30. And if you've not been before, I highly recommend it, and probably someone who has been would also recommend it. It's the highlight of any tour we do in the building. Some housekeeping information before we get started. Most of you probably know by now that the restrooms are out in the hall and down to the left. Go past the double glass doors, be the first on the left. There's coffee and tea service, and breaks and lunch that will be served in the adjoining room. And if you would like to have something, we're going to have a break again at 11 a.m., but if you would like something before that, just feel free to come and go as you need to, and we will have to be out of that room, I think, by 11:15, because the caterers will come in to set up lunch. If you need any kind of assistance, please ask at the registration desk. And I'll mention, as Jillian did, that we understand some people were harassed on parking in the sense that they were asked to pay. I don't know if we can get you reimbursed. I believe that to be there all day might be $8 or $10. I'm not really sure. We are having an ongoing discussion with University Parking Services. Anyone who works with the university knows that this is always an ongoing thing about getting parking anywhere on this campus. So we will do the best we can. I would like for you, how many actually paid this morning? Okay. Well, would you please give your name at the registration desk? As I said, I cannot promise that we will get you reimbursed, but we will do the best we can. And hope that we can, at some point, get over having to do something like this when we have groups come in. Because one of our real desires in having this new building and having it in such a prominent place on campus was to bring in people from the community and from statewide. So we really do want to continue doing that. Following today's symposium, there will be a reception recognizing Dr. Carol Britton Law's students who have prepared pop-up exhibits based on their work with the collections in the Georgia Disability History Archive. Dr. Laws works at IHDD here on campus. She's an associate clinical professor and coordinator of the Disability Studies certificate program at the undergraduate and graduate level. This year, she is one of Special Collections Library's faculty fellows. So we hope that you will stay after the symposium and talk with the students about their exhibits, congratulate them on their work, and enjoy a little bit of refreshment before you hit the road. In 2013, the Russell Library partnered with the Georgia Disability History Alliance to establish the archive. This was the first statewide initiative to capture and promote this history. For the archive, we want to document the vital and transformative work undertaken by disability activists, advocates, and organizations, and the experiences of persons with disabilities over the past 100 plus years. So we're looking not only for current collections, but older collections here in the state of Georgia. Presently, we have nearly 20 oral history interviews and around 30 collections. And over half of these collections are already available for research. We need your help to identify individuals and organizations within the disability rights community that may have materials for the archive. And there is on the registration desk a call for papers and historical materials, which gives you more information about what we're looking for, and also our contact information. So I really encourage you to think about whether you yourself or you have friends that you think have papers that would be good for the collection, and to get in touch with us, give us a call. We'll be glad to discuss that with you more fully. And I really encourage you to do that, because the only way we can grow this collection, establish it, is to have your help. So we appreciate your attendance today at this, our 4th annual Disability History Symposium. It's such a pleasure to see familiar faces and new faces as well. So I hope that you will plan to come back every year. Thank you.
Good morning. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this morning. I found out that I was going to do this last night about 8 o'clock when Jillian said, "Oh yeah, we talked about that." Okay. So I did the 2018 thing. I Googled, I LinkedIn, I went to Facebook, and here's what I learned. Beth English has been a member of the Georgia Municipal Association since 1997, and is either the immediate past president or one removed from that, of that organization. And I can tell you from personal experience, she has helped people with disabilities in ways that you don't even know in that role. She has been a member of the Vienna City Council for 20 plus years. And when I moved to Georgia, I really thought it was Vienna, but I was quickly corrected about Vienna sausage, you know. She also is the very recently retired executive director of Southwest Georgia Easter Seals. And so I thought, well, that's good. Her strengths are, according to LinkedIn, community outreach and fundraising. And I thought, I've known Beth for 25 years. I don't know why I'm looking up stuff that I already know. So here's what I really know about Beth. She's a South Georgia girl, and that means a lot. And if you're a South Georgia person, you know what it means. She's always on the move. Don't ever think she's going to be in one place long. She's passionate about people with disabilities and supporting them and their families. And through the years, I can't imagine the thousands of lives that she has touched. No task is too great for Beth. She doesn't take no for an answer. She finishes what she starts. She knows all the back roads of South Georgia and maybe even across the state. And she is my dear colleague and friend. Welcome, Beth English.
I'm old school. I have notebook paper. Thank you, Sally. It's a little scary sometimes when people you know and love are asked to introduce you. You're not quite sure how many of your secrets are going to come out of whatever can you've kept them in for a long time. Thank you, Cheryl, for also talking about the Disability History Project. Myself and Annette Boland and John Chandler and many others have been a part of that wonderful interview process. And I think it ended up being about 4 hours for each of us because there's so much to tell and there's so much to remember and there's so much progress that's been made, even though sometimes you may not feel like it has. For those of us who've been around a little while, I have a lot of friends in this room that I can say that about. You can see things change and you can see things happen. So anyway, when I was asked to speak at this conference, I've been a part of the Disability History Project since we started it. It's something that's very exciting to me because I've always been someone who loved history and loved preserving history, and that kind of leads into what I'm going to talk about. Because I wanted to say, well, what is it that I want to share, and then how do I want to share it? And after all, like Sally said, 42 years of working as an advocate and a service provider to individuals with diverse abilities certainly gives you a wealth of information and a lot of stories to tell and a lot of things to look back on. But when all is said and done, it really, like Jillian mentioned, it's the stories that count. Did you know, and many of you probably do, that storytelling predates any kind of written history? Did you know that every single culture, including all the ancient ones, had storytelling as a part of what they did and what they have always done? Tahir Shah in Arabian Nights says, and I quote, "Stories are a communal currency of humanity." So I decided to tell you mine. Now, I'm not going to go back to 1953 and tell you everything that I've ever thought about or wished for or hoped for, but I do want to talk about a couple of things that certainly are in line with our topic today of emerging from it and being included. As a child growing up in South Georgia, my maternal grandparents were a very, very big part of my life. I spent all my summers on their farm in Ware County, Georgia. And when I was 10 years old, my dad and the uncles decided they would build my grandmother a new wash house. Now, many of you in this room don't have a clue what I'm talking about. But my grandmother had an old roller washer wringer that was on the back porch, and that's how they did laundry. And they hung the clothes out to dry. Some of you are old enough to have helped do that. And so they were going to build my grandmother a wash house so that she could have a real new washer and dryer. And in order to do that, they had to tear down the old smokehouse. Now, how many of y'all know what a smokehouse is? A few hands. Okay. That's where they hung meat to actually dry. It was salted and it hung there and it stayed there, and I'm sure they would probably have a stroke if somebody did it now. So anyway, as they began to clear out this wooden building, I wasn't allowed to be there because I was a 10-year-old nosy little kid. So I was sitting on porch steps. And they brought out this very large burlap covered package. Well, nobody told me I could do that. So I went and I unwrapped that package. And in it were 3 framed photographs. So like any other child, I went to my grandmother and I said, "Grandmother, who are these people?" And she very quickly told me that the first one was my papa's parents, the one were her grandparents, and then the last one were her parents. And then she began to cry when she told me that. And a story began to unfold that literally would follow me the rest of my life. Molly Bell Williams was born in 1892, my grandmother, the middle daughter of Herbert Martin Williams and Dicey Lucinda Whitley Williams. She had a younger brother, and a new baby was on the way. On October in October of 1900, 2 weeks after the birth of a little boy, Dicey died, leaving her husband with 5 children to care for. Herbert Williams was a turpentine rider and farmer. Both jobs demanded long hours, and so the children were boarded out with friends and neighbors. The baby died within a month. The other son died from reasons my grandmother could not remember through her tears. She met my grandfather and married at 15 in 1906. Now, back in those days, you didn't live to be but about 40, so 15 was not that young. As she told her story, her sorrow was just very evident. Her dad's business partner had swindled him out of their earnings, and he died somewhere in Milledgeville, and that's all we knew. The notice of his death came 2 months after the event, and my grandmother had no way of knowing any details. Our search for Papa Williams really officially began, as did my passion for genealogy and all things family. It took 9 years, 1972, to finally verify that Herbert Martin Williams had indeed been a patient at Central State Hospital and had died and was buried there in 1907. My sister Casey went to work at the hospital many years later, and we decided to try to find our Papa Williams grave. That search led to our family's involvement in the cemetery restoration project. It was an initiative that received national attention and sparked replication efforts for mental health consumer groups across the country. I don't know if any of you have seen pictures of that cemetery, but it certainly brings home the point of being invisible. All of the graves were marked with a metal spike marker with a number. My grandfather was number 1951. In their haste to keep the grounds well maintained, the staff of the hospital threw all the markers into a pile, and so all of the graves for many, many years were left unmarked. And if you ever go to that cemetery and you walk through that cemetery, you will have an overwhelming feeling of what it means to be invisible. Today, there's a beautiful angel that guards those hundreds of previously forgotten lives who were excluded in death just as they were in life. Stories have power. I don't want to, my picture, this is the actual picture, not the frame, but the picture that was in the barn. So I'm going to leave it up here if you want to come see it. It's definitely an 1800s old picture. Those of you in the room who have worked with the state in any direction know how people are so particular about medical records and HIPAA and Medicaid compliance. Are any of those words ringing a bell with anybody? This is his entire clinical record. And it says, from Ware County, age 49, widowed farmer Baptist. First symptoms this attack. Manifested about 2 years ago by wandering absent. Loss of memory, cause unknown, but patient has known to be a drinking man. I thought that was kind of interesting to go with Baptist, but anyway, I will not say anything else about that. But anyway, so stories have power. They are the best way to put ideas into the world, says Robert McLeod. Let me tell you another story that brings Central State Hospital and my life's work full circle. It was winter quarter, 1973, and the class was called Abnormal Psychology. I don't think they call things like that anymore. The class was relatively small, and so our very, very brave professor, Dr. Rosemary Johnson from Ashburn, Georgia, arranged a trip to Central State Hospital and several other venues that included the federal prison in Atlanta. We met with Governor Lester Maddox at the governor's office, and Underground Atlanta in the first go-around. Some of you were old enough to remember the first renaissance of Underground. I can still remember a room in the Boone building. Philip J., you'll probably remember this one, at Central State. When I close my eyes, I can see it right now. It was completely, all the way around the room were metal, basically small cages, and in every one of those caged beds was a child with a significant disability. In every instance, doctors had told families, place your child at Central State, forget you ever had it, and go home and have another child. And as horrible and cruel as that sounds, that was still happening in the 1990s. But that particular experience, seeing those children, I can still remember the faces of several of those children, just really imprinted upon me, every part of my being, the wrongness of exclusion, of isolation, and of warehousing people. And I believe it really remained the driving force for my life's work in advocacy and in developing community for people with disabilities. When DHR Commissioner Tommy Olmstead appointed me to the Hospital Closure Commission, it was with great determination and excitement that I joined other advocates, parents, and providers in bringing people home. The process was long and difficult. It met with emotional objections from parents, the neighborhood association in Buckhead, and eventually lawmakers. At the Senate hearing, the room was packed. Stories prevailed on both sides of the issue. Pleas from families who had no experience and no confidence in community services were made. Testimonials from parents and advocates who knew the value of community and inclusion were also made. Brook Run closed, followed by GMHI. And in so many ways, the Justice Department settlement agreement and numerous legal directives, such as the Olmstead ruling, opened the door wider for community and provided a mandate for funding needed to move forward. Closed Southwestern State Hospital, closed Northwest Georgia Hospital, and admission for people with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities stopped. A big step for Georgia. Is it perfect? No. Are community services and supports designed so that a person can actually make decisions and determine their own destinies? Not so much. But where communities are engaged and there is leadership, good things are happening. Especially in my part of rural Georgia, where the natural sense of community and connectedness is still very strong. Oh, where's my help? Okay. Got a video I want to show, but I don't know how to do this. He's coming. I told y'all I was not a technology girl. I'm not pen and paper. Okay, what did I do? This is just an example of what happens with community.
From the time Cody started, it was an uphill fight for him. And all Cody ever wanted to be was fireman. That was all he ever wanted to be, was the story that I was told. And it had to be a fight for him. Since Cody's been here, he's participated in daily training. Anything that we do, he's done. He goes out to the training field with them when they go out and train. He eats with them. He sits in class with them. If we're going to a class outside the department, Cody loads up on the truck and goes with him.
I learned how to clean up the station, the truck bay. I did some hose training. I did quick dress. You have to get ready in less than a minute. I've been wanting to be a firefighter since 4 years old.
He would tell me every day something new. The guys worked with him real well. They taught him everything about the truck. They taught him about fire hydrants. They taught him about the gear, what he had to wear, how fast you had to put on your gear. He would tell me daily that he was practicing every day. Like I think one day it was like 1 minute and 10 seconds.
He's been through a lot of classes on fire behavior, fire terminology, ladders, ropes and knots. The list goes on of what Cody has learned in the basic rudimentary skills. Cody's also done an extrication class. Cody was out behind this fire station with the guys cutting cars up and learning the proper way to do it and things. The things that you see everyday firefighters doing it every day during their career, Cody can do most of that.
We used some tools and tore it up to see how it would work. It's been a lot of fun. I got my driver's license and a truck. I got a support volunteer paper. If I wasn't doing this, I probably wouldn't be doing nothing.
On a typical work day for me and my husband, Cody was at home taking care of the dogs, just washing clothes. She'd keep the house straight, but typically he would be at home by himself.
True story is in all of what we thought we were going to give to Cody was nothing next to what Cody gave to us.
I don't think any of this would have been possible without Easter Seal.
He's exceeded, I think, any expectations that anybody had. Cody is a true success story.
That's not the end of the story. Cody missed passing his firefighter's exam by 4 points. We provided a tutor. His teacher paid his tuition. Cody is now a full-fledged volunteer firefighter and on the Firefighters Pension Fund for the state of Georgia. This video really caught the imagination of a lot of people, and we've had several parents that have said, my son's always talked about being a firefighter. We never thought it was possible. But again, it's pulling the people in the community around the person and figuring all that out. It works. Our national organization decided to feature Cody at a recent Century 21 International Conference. Century 21 happens to be one of our partners. Cody received not one, but 2 standing ovations for his determination, for his success, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful way for him to show the possibilities that are out there when we do the right things in the right way at the right time. I'm saving the rest of my comments for this afternoon, so thank you so much for letting me share my stories this morning.
Well, before I introduce our next speaker, I would like us to pause in remembrance. David and Cecil Rosenthal, 2 men who were lifelong members of the Tree of Life Synagogue, along with 9 others, were slain last Saturday in Pittsburgh. They were devoted to their temple, never missing services. It was their home, their rabbi said. David was reserved and private with a wicked sense of humor, and Cecil was outgoing and greeted everyone as they entered the temple. Their brother-in-law said, "Our lives were more enriched knowing them." Both Cecil and David lived with a disability. Thank you. So in the words of the great poet, activist, and storyteller Maya Angelou, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. I've got the honor of introducing to you our next speaker, Rachel Watson. Rachel? who's a second-year graduate student in art here at the University of Georgia. Rachel is a native of Georgia, and she created the installation you see over in the corner of the room, which she's going to talk about. We have a little film to introduce you to Rachel before she speaks. But when I asked Rachel why this installation, she said, I always wondered about how people treat other people. So Rachel is an artist who, by lifting up the pain, helps us face the pain. And I know Rachel is here with her mother. So thank you, Mom, for raising such an incredible artist.
Patient 1, Tillman Barnett, lunatic from Bibb County, age 30, married, cause and duration of insanity unknown. Admitted December 15th, 1842, died of mechanical exhaustion June 18th, 1843. Patient 2, George Maxwell, lunatic, condition demented and cataleptic, convict from the penitentiary, age 36, single, cause of insanity, confinement in the penitentiary, duration 2 years, admitted January 4th, 1843, escaped slightly improved September 1st, 1844, heard from 2 months afterwards in Savannah. Patient 3, Moses Harris, lunatic from Wayne County, age 54, married, cause of insanity, religious excitement, duration unknown, admitted January 23rd, 1843, removed by his friends November 7th, 1843. Patient 886, Martha A. Chillards, from Dawson County, pauper, married, has 6 children, youngest one is 1 year old, is a native of Georgia, age about 35 years, duration of insanity about 6 months, cause unknown. Very little known about her by the man who brought her to the asylum, was brought here claimed to prevent her from escaping from the wagon. Cause of death of one of her children by pouring hot coffee into its mouth, received March 5th, 1861. Patient 887, Wiley Peavy, pauper idiot from Telfair County, age about 35 years, received March 10th, 1861, died August 30th, 1861. Patient 888, Ellen Lennons, pauper patient from Augusta, native of Ireland, has been in America only 4 months, age about 21 years. Single, duration of insanity supposed to be only 2 months, supposed to result from suppression of menses, sleepless but quiet, careless in her habits. Received March 12, 1861. These are the first and last 3 patients admitted into Central State Hospital, originally called Georgia State Lunatic, Idiot, and Epileptic Asylum, during 1842 to 1861. They were categorized as a lunatic for reasons such as religious excitement, inclination to study, jealousy, disappointed affection, intemperance, and epilepsy. Out of the men, women, and children, 38 escaped, 409 died, 143 were cured, 45 were removed by their friends or family, 27 readmitted, and 226 of these patients' files were incomplete. Out of the 888, 43 patients were under the age of 18, 526 were male. Patient 126 was Harriet Gaddis. She was a idiot from Cherokee County, age 18, admitted December 8, 1846, but died December 30th, 1909 from pneumonia and was buried there. Harriet was institutionalized for 63 years and 22 days. Her wood representation is 47.25 inches and is the tallest piece of the installation. Over the last month and a half, I've spent 107 hours sanding, branding, and oiling each of the 888 pieces of wood. I hope that my attention to detail shows the care that I have for each of the individuals in this facility. I'm currently working on pieces that are also about Central State. I am typing out on a 1920s typewriter the entire registrar that the installation was based on. It will be typed on one long scroll, and when finished, will hang beside this piece. I have a small portion of it here with me if you guys want to see it during the break. I'm also cutting out by hand miniature copper grave markers that were inspired by Cedar Lane Cemetery on the hospital grounds. During the 1960s, many of the numbered grave markers were gathered up and discarded in order for prison inmates to clean up the grounds more efficiently. The Georgia Consumer Council responded to this in the 1990s and collected as many iron markers as they could find and placed them into Cedar Lane Cemetery. There are 2,000 numbered markers that represent some 25,000 patients that were buried on the grounds. I'm beginning my installation by collecting as many names of patients that died at Central State as I can. I began my research here at the Special Collections Library and will continue my research at Georgia Archives and the Georgia College and State University Archives. I'm hoping to find anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 names to etch into each copper grave marker. I will next blind emboss a grave marker shape into 25,000 sheets of paper to represent the names I couldn't find. I'm also working with the redevelopment company that's at Central State right now, and they're allowing me to shoot Super 8 video inside at the intake building and also around the grounds. This piece that I'm just beginning to start will be shot from the perspective of a new patient. If you'd like to see samples from my upcoming work, I have them with me, and we can talk about it during the break. And I'd just like to thank Jillian and Robin for having me and for creating this beautiful video and the images that go along with the installation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, very much. And please, on the break, not only take an opportunity to go with Rachel and stand by her installation and talk to you more about it, but thank you very much for your attention to detail and listening to the lives of people who've gone in such an exquisite way. It makes a big difference to honor those people, even today. So you have a break now. Oh, I forget this thing. I'm so sorry. Thank you, friends, for telling me you can't hear me. I said thank you for your attention to detail, Rachel, and listening to the lives of people. So we have a break now for 15 minutes. You can come to the installation and talk with Rachel. You can also go outside. Dr. Carol Britton-Laws is here. Where are you, Carol? Her students have created incredible exhibits outside this door, both on the left and the right of the first part of this hallway. These are exhibits in boxes, glass boxes, that are history written by people with disabilities, and they've done an incredible job of creating an exhibit for you. So please look at those. Please enjoy the break, and we will be back in.
All right. We're going to go ahead and begin the next portion of our program in order to stay on task, stay on time. Everybody's time is valuable. And I didn't know what Beth was going to talk about. I didn't know the depth to which Rachel had really gone to with this project. But they both have sort of led right into the video we're going to see next, which is about, more specifically, a little bit more about the cemetery project and about an extraordinary event that took place in the year 2000. So I first met Dr. Tom Hester in probably 1995 or 96 during the closure of Rivers Crossing here in Athens. And then worked with him through the closure of Brook Run, where I met any number of people, including Gail. And on to GMHI, where I met Mary Lou. So there are lots of people in the room that have stories and can really provide greater detail. Dr. Hester was the state medical director and director of the Hospital Services, or MH at the time, MR, and SA, which is now our DBHDD. Dr. Hester worked closely with members of the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network and Larry Fricks, who was the first director of the Office of Consumer Relations at the department, to bring a model of recovery to the forefront in Georgia. In March of 1997, members of the Georgia Consumer Council toured a cemetery. Beth has talked about that. She might have been there. At Central State, one of at least 6 cemeteries that are on the grounds of the hospital. There may be 7, but they have found 6. And I know Rachel talked about 25,000. There are estimates that could go as high as 40,000 graves on the grounds of Central State Hospital through the years. The council members discovered a cemetery that was neglected, overgrown, and where, as you now know, grave markers had been pulled up and pushed over so that it would be easier to mow the grass. The cemetery project was born during that visit. There were a lot of pieces to that project, and I have a publication with me that I only have the one copy with me, but I'll ask Jillian, it should be over there, Jillian, to hold that up. And anybody who might be interested in having a copy, if you will give your name at the registration table, we will see about copying for you. When you read through that, they talk about all the steps that went into making this project happen, but they talk about the final step, being Dr. Hester's presentation in 2000 at the annual consumer conference that's held every year in August. And at that conference, for the first time ever, Dr. Hester formally apologized for the past abuses and neglect. I think Mary Lou was there. I am relatively certain no one in leadership at a state office was aware that that's what he was going to do. It was monumental to the consumers who were there. It was the first time such an extraordinary apology had been made in public in Georgia by a state official. So this video is a little bit of Dr. Hester's statements, a little bit of Bud Merritt, who worked at, did I work at the state office ever? Was he always at Central State? Was always at Central State. And a couple of other people who had worked at Central State for a number of years. So I invite you to see this, and let me see if I can figure out how to make this start. That's always such a powerful statement to me, and I think we have done better. I think that we are there, not by a long shot. And that's why we continue to remember our history as we begin to move forward now. So our next short video is called Change of Address. And the women that you will meet in this are 2 women who lived at Central State, who were discharged and transitioned to community-based services provided by Southwest Georgia Easter Seals. And to tell that story, I want to just introduce the next speaker, one of which is words paint pictures and pictures tell stories. That's been the theme. It will always be the theme. Everyone has a story, and this is the story of 2 women. This video, many of these videos have been and still still photos have been taken by my friend Rayne. Robin focuses on struggles and victories of those who have been shunned, misunderstood, ignored, and sometimes feared. Robin has a 35-year career as a newspaper, magazine, and photojournalist. She believes that all of the previous work that she has done prepared her for the work she is doing now as a staff photojournalist, writer, and documentary filmmaker for the Institute on Human Development and Disability at the University of Georgia. Robin?
I'm supposed to say a couple of words. I'd rather just show the pictures because I don't. Let's just tell the story.
I said to Robin when I saw this little film, I said, I love the way you titled it, Robin, because change of address doesn't always mean that you're getting a bigger life in your community. So, thank you, thank you. So before lunch, we have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to hear a story that has riveted many of us in the state of Georgia. I'm going to introduce to you three people. First of all, I'm going to introduce Barbara Fischer. Barbara, come up here. This is what you can do when you've known people for years. Barbara, for 40 years, worked in citizen advocacy in a formal sense. 30, okay. All right. Barbara will always correct you if you're wrong, okay? As a state coordinator of the citizen advocacy offices around the state. But importantly to me, Barbara's been a friend for probably 30 years. And Barbara's the kind of friend that when I was sitting one day in the car sobbing because I'd heard some difficult news, Barbara was the first person I called. She's that kind of friend, stays right with you all the way. And not afraid to look at hard, difficult things. The second person I want to introduce is Lucretia Montel Felder, all the way from Valdosta, Georgia. Lucretia, she's a strong woman of resilience and courage. And she'll tell you more about that. The third person I want to introduce, who's going to say a few words to us before Barb and Lucretia speak, is Alan Judd. Alan, where are you? We've asked Alan to come. Alan, all the way from Atlanta. Alan has been an investigative reporter for 19 years for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and has written many articles, including the Hidden Shame series in 2007. And the series of articles that you're seeing on the screen, Alan wrote about Lucretia and Barb. And Alan's going to share a word with you about the power of telling your story. As a committed journalist, he invites us to bear witness, to tell the truth, and give voice to those who are invisible. So thank you, Alan, for your work. And we need journalists who tell the truth more than ever before. And so thank you for being you.
Hello. I don't have a lot prepared because I didn't really want to take the time away from the people who are really here. We all should be talking about. But I did want to say I appreciated so much how Barb and Lucretia were so willing to tell their story. Some of it is not always pleasant. It's not easy. It's really exposing yourself to a lot of people, and you may not have noticed this, but everybody in the world is not very kind these days. So there are there's some risk to that, I think, to put yourself out there. But they both did that, and I really appreciated that. One reason is, sadly, many of the stories I've written about the mental health disability system in the state of Georgia have dealt with people who had very bad outcomes. There are obviously thousands of those. People who have not been treated well, people who have just died of neglect and abuse and just being forgotten. So when I first got the email from Barb, I probably didn't respond to it right away because I get a lot of those. Sometimes they make, they seem something I should do, and sometimes I just can't get to them. But I did call you back, and we went from there. And I'm so glad I did, because it struck me that it was just such a tremendous injustice for Lucretia to have been institutionalized, basically, in one way or another for almost her entire life. It just seemed to be completely at odds with the policy of the state, with the mandates of the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. There just seemed to be no way to justify what the state had done to her, which is essentially forget her for decades. And there was no reason for that. So I was really, really honored to be able to tell the story. I would encourage anyone who has a story to tell to do that. If you live in communities across the state, you should contact your local newspapers. Sometimes they can do the same work as well. Their resources might be a little less than ours, but they can try. But it's important to talk about this, because there has been this stigma around all these issues for all these decades, and the more openness and the more information we have, I think the better everybody's life will be. So anyway, I want to let you guys go, because this is your story.
We thank you.
My name is Lucretia Felder, and I'm from Valdosta, and I was at Columbia Regional Hospital for 11 years, and then I moved out to the community in August 2018, and I got out the hospital August the 30th, and this month will be two years for me, 2 months for me, and that's all I'm gonna say.
Lucretia. Okay, so.
Okay, my life when
a little bit.
Okay, I was 2 years old when I got taken from my mom and dad, and my mom and dad had some issues between them and themselves, and I've been taken to a defense custody, foster home, institutionalized, and I've been in institution 11 years, and all my life, and that didn't work out for me. So I've been aggressive behavior, and I had a bad childhood. I'm in Valdosta. I'm in Valdosta, Georgia now, in my own pretty house, three bedroom, 2 bath, and my house is really nice, and I like it, and I'm trying to make new friends now in Valdosta, but I got 10 new staff. They're younger, and I'm older.
Let me just say this. For me, when her support people brought her yesterday, to my house, our house.
Yeah.
It was the first time she ever stepped over the threshold of my home. After years of not being able to do any of that. One of the things Lucretia says to me is, Mama, you used to have 5 kids, now you got 6. And since she's moved to Valdosta, we made cookies for neighbors and introduced yourself to neighbors, right? When she broke her ankle by riding a bicycle, and it was pretty serious, she's had a plate and she's got screws and pins. That kind of slowed down the progress of the things she could be doing. She will be looking for work with support for that, right? Would you like to tell about some of the kind of social things that you've been doing since you've been in Valdosta?
I went to bingo one day and I won $125. I was lucky to won $500, but I missed the play because I didn't call bingo. But I was lucky that I won $125. And I go bowling, I go grocery shopping, and I go riding around with my staff looking at different places. I like Valdosta. But I prefer to live in Macon, close to my mom.
Maybe that can happen sometime.
Yeah.
When you think of someone who is 44 years old and for 42 of those years this is like her life was a TV set, do you know? And with other people who were struggling as she was. And since this woman got out 2 months ago, she is a warrior. She is strong. She is determined. She's smart. And she is so kind. You have no idea. And she had a lot of support also from Renee, Katie, people at Georgia Advocacy Office. And before we got in touch with Alan, it was because everybody had done every damn thing they could, and the state was doing nothing. She would have been left there. Alan wrote that story on a Sunday. Friday, 4 people from the state are at the prison to see her. Now, and then when she had her hearing, and the judge said you got 30 days, so she was out on the 30th of August. So people don't feel as though there's nothing else. You just gotta keep fighting. Just gotta keep fighting and never say no.
Thank y'all, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, what Barbara didn't say about herself, which she wouldn't, is that Barbara is a woman of great determination and staying with power and staying with Lucretia all these many years. So, thank you. Thank you to both of you. Yeah. So we are at lunchtime, and I would like you to, in this room, get your lunch, and if you can come back within a few minutes, 5 minutes until lunch, okay. Take a few minutes to get your lunch and come back and get seated. We're going to have a short film by our next speakers, and then a presentation by them during lunch. There are keynote speakers during lunch. And if you'd like to talk with our keynote speakers before they speak, they're sitting right here, Kathi Frankel and Eric Naindouba. I want to also again encourage you to visit the glass boxes, 4 of them on this end of the hall that were prepared by the students. History of actions by people with disabilities and written by people with disabilities. They're beautiful exhibits in the glass boxes. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Gabby Melnick, who's in the far corner of the room, who's our graphic artist, who is recording the whole day-to-day on wallpaper and has a beautiful graphic recording of it. I'm delighted to introduce a new American, Challenges and Opportunities. I have sitting right here next to me, Eric Naindouba, who is 13 years old, and his citizen advocate, excuse me? Tomorrow is 13 years old. Oh, so your birthday is tomorrow. Well, let's clap. That's wonderful. Sitting next to Eric is Kathi Frankel, his citizen advocate. Eric is from the Central African Republic. He is a war survivor, a political refugee, and a new American citizen. Eric has lived in Clarkston, Georgia, which is in the larger city of Atlanta area, for the last 9 years with his mother and his sister. And their presentation is about the power of people coming to know one another, mean a lot to one another, and this is the glue that holds our communities together. Those are actually the words of Dorona King, the coordinator in Atlanta, DeKalb Citizen Advocacy. She didn't know I was going to say that, but I borrowed those words from her, and I figure you should give credit where credit is due. Eric and Kathi are honored to speak to you of the power of love, spreading it to others, and leading by example. So we'll have a short film first, and then Kathi and Eric will speak. Thank you.
So Eric has been can y'all hear me okay? Yeah. Eric has been the star of many movies of a friend of mine named Will Wright. He is an Emory University student right now and loves to tell Eric's stories. So we have lots more films that we can share, but we really like that one because it shows really where Eric came from. Eric is a war survivor. Yeah. And he spent 5 years of his life in a refugee camp. And I'm going to let him tell some of this. Hold on, let me turn this on, Eric. I know, you got the mic, don't you? Okay, hang on. Okay. Where was the refugee camp? That is Cameroon. So, okay, can I tell them what you said real quick? Okay. So, he came to America when he was 5. And as soon as he got here, he started getting all kinds of health-related services. He was in the hospital several times, and I worked in the pediatric hospital, and I was there getting a cup of coffee one day in the lobby, and he and his mom were lost. And that's how I ran into him, and we became friends immediately. I first started working with him sort of in more of a clinical way, thinking maybe I could help him with his physical therapy, but I found that the friendship was much more important than the clinical piece, and we've been together ever since. It's been about 8 years. And it's not been easy. It's not easy here in America like they tell you it's going to be. When Kathi works with me, it's easier. We get more stuff done when Kathy's around. And more people come around when Kathy's around. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Okay. Eric has a few words, but I always know what they mean. So usually a few word sentence, we know what we're talking about. Dorona knows too. Dorona's over there, and she helped him a lot too. You got somebody where? Somebody else in the room? Where are they? David? You're not looking at David yet. Somebody else. Are you talking? Oh, there was Deborah. Deborah was at one of his IEP meetings, and she forgot, but he remembered. He remembers Deborah, and he appreciates everything that everyone's been able to do for him. You know, we've been watching the stories this morning, and we realized that this kind of history has to be discussed and revealed so that we don't repeat these heinous treatments of people. But as I looked at Eric and I think about what his family has been through in the displacement from Africa and what so many people in Africa have suffered, at least these folks have a grave.
Yeah.
Eric's family, some of them have been completely wiped out. There's been no burial, there's been no ceremony, and they continue to die over in Africa. The country that he's from is one of the most dangerous places for people to live in the world. So the fact that Eric is here is a total miracle. Total. And the fact that he's my friend is another total miracle. Because he teaches me so much about what it means to be resilient. And when I go to school. You know what you want? Oh, he's, okay. He needs one-on-one support at school. That's what he's saying right now. He's on his platform. I wondered how long it would take. You know, we have this great story, and we have some help. We have a lot of friends. But the truth is, I can tell you that what Eric has faced in the school system, the faces of the people that we have seen in the IEP meetings probably rival some of the people in that African war. I have never seen so much hate, so much disrespect, and so much inability to take the perspective of the other. So that's why he has to think about that. This 13-year-old person has to think about the fact that he may not have enough support at school. And he has to hire a lawyer to be able to do that. I'm sure that's a story that a lot of you have faced. And we're just getting into it now. We've been having a real good time laughing about stuff for a long time, but we can't do it anymore, can we?
Yeah.
No, we gotta get serious. Because Eric has a friend here named David. I'm gonna ask David to come on up because he's a big part of our life. David said something to me the other day that was so profound. Eric comes home with these mounds of homework because they don't help him at school during the day very much. And David said, you know, this is not about going out for pizza or going to a movie. This is a man that needs to get his homework done. And now David, I mean, at first when David was spending his afternoons with Eric, I was hoping they would get to go to the park or go, I don't know, what did you want to do? Go bowling or something? What did you want to do? Oh, yesterday they did go out. What did you do? Trick or treat. So that was fun. Yeah. And that was the first time he's ever trick or treated in Clarkston. I don't remember them ever having candy before. But anyway, that's an aside note. Eric needs more support at school so that he can learn, because this is a very bright person and he has a lot of things that he wants to do, right?
And for you.
And for you.
And for you. Yes, he wants to do things for you. David spends a lot of time with Eric now, and he's even getting better and better with helping me. Yeah, helping us.
Go on.
David, what?
Go on.
So our research undercover.
Yeah.
David's going undercover research with you.
No.
David doesn't know nothing. Before. That's right. David did not know what it was like to be disabled before this. Just like me. I didn't either.
Well, Eric talks a lot about special needs community, you know, not just himself. And when he was saying about me going undercover with him at the center that I work at, that I actually met Eric at, he's a very expressive person. He's very perceptive. He, like I said, he showed me a lot. A lot of the individuals that we work with are very aware of what's going on with them and around them. And just because they're not able to express it,
We are one.
like you said, they're regular. So, you know, I engage with Eric a lot. I enjoy it, and he's actually speaking of. You know, we watched that the hospital, and it was crazy. And Eric kept looking back at me because that's kind of what he's talking about. Like, there are things that go on that aren't really like fair. But probably, you know, in 2018, it's probably not at the scale that it was at during these times, but.
When I go to school, people, before.
He said the teachers were saying he didn't know nothing at all. And I've just been learning a lot from him and Kathi. So I'm gonna let them speak. I just wanted to clarify the undercover thing.
Stay with us. David's going to stay with us and help me with our interpretation. What? Now, what else do you want to talk about? Do we know what you mean?
Yeah.
About what? Teachers. That's say. So he wants to know if you, and I think you do understand what he means when he said they don't think I knew anything. Eric, all right, how many languages do you speak? This is the fun part. 4. Okay, he speaks 4 languages. When he came in the country, he didn't speak English, right? So if you have cerebral palsy and you can't really talk that much and you don't speak English, most people don't think you know what? Anything, right? But really, he knew 3 languages at that time. And look how quickly he's learned English. He's completely fluent in English, which is, very impressive because his mom is not completely fluent in English. And he's better now than he ever has been. Yeah. So that was the first thing that he felt really upset about. Dorona? You talking about Dorona?
Yeah.
She introduced you to people.
No. Oh, God.
Oh, okay, yeah. He wants to tell the story about how Dorona met him. Okay, so I'm a Jewish mom, so that should tell you a lot. I get really upset about things and when they don't go right, and I want everything to be just right. And when things weren't going just right for Eric and his family, I was really, really, really getting depressed and upset. And I can only imagine how they felt because I was like losing my tree. So the International Rescue Committee had plopped them in this apartment in Clarkston with no transportation, no grocery store, no pharmacy, with a medically fragile person at the time. He's no longer fragile, as you can see, but at the time he was really thin and needed his medicine, and he was having frequent seizures. And this left them very, very vulnerable to guess who? Say it all at once. DFACS.
Oh.
So they were getting regular visits from DFACS, and I really could not imagine someone surviving a war, coming to this country, being invited to this country, and then losing their child to the DFACS system. And in my opinion, some things are worse than death. Losing my child would be worse than death. So I started asking around, and someone told me about this place called Jubilee, where they welcomed refugees for the first 6 months after coming over from war-torn areas, and it's in Comer, Georgia. It's actually only about 20 minutes from here. It was started by Don Mosley, who runs Habitat for Humanity, and I called him up and I said, look, I've got a family that's not in the right place. They need some healing. I need some healing. Can they come? And he says, well, Kathi, we really don't. Now, this is a nice guy, by the way. And he said, I really can't take people after they've already been in the city. They've already developed too many difficulties, too many habits, whatever. And I said, let me send you a movie. So I sent a movie that Will made again of Eric and me. And about 2 days later, he called me and he said, I would like for Eric, Carol, and Nestorine to come for the summer and stay in the same cabin that Jimmy Carter stayed in. Wow. You didn't know Jimmy Carter stayed there? Well, he used to be president. So, before you got here. Anyway, he would like you a lot. Anyway, so they spent the summer there, and it was quite lovely. And they put out a newspaper, and I don't know how Dorona, I guess Dorona already had a relationship with Jubilee somehow. And she saw the paper. She saw this great photograph of Eric sliding down this water slide, laughing his head off as usual. And anyway, the rest is history. She asked if he could be, or she thought about matching him with a citizen advocate. I didn't really know that I was a citizen advocate, but she helped me define what that really means and has coached me along quite a bit as I try to understand the best ways to, as she said today, see through the cracks, right?
Yeah.
See through the cracks and make sure that Eric does not fall through one of those cracks. And he's recently been approved for the Medicaid waiver. Whether that's good or bad, we're happy about it because that's how we've been able to have David help us. And that's been such a blessing. And we hope to create more support so that Eric can do some of the things that he wants to do. Now tell him what some of your job, what you hope to do when you grow up.
my idea.
He has ideas.
Equal.
Make special needs people. Oh, equal. Let me let David. David's going to talk.
Equal rights for special needs is one of his main and his own daycare.
You want friends? You want to be mayor?
Yeah, he also wants to be a mayor.
And what else?
And an inventor.
Inventor, that's right. And a dentist.
That's it.
And that's it.
My iPad.
And he wants an iPad.
Communication board.
Yeah. So the other film that I brought, and I don't know if I have enough time to show you, I've tried to highlight the fact that communication for Eric is so, as it is for any of us, just a big hurdle right now. And he wants that. That's what he wants. He wants to be able to use his voice, and the motor skills right now have not been able we haven't figured out the best way. We've tried eye gaze, we've tried, every time you go to a different professional, they have about 10 things to tell you that you can do, and none of them have really worked. So I'm still exploring things, and Will made another film for me to tell this place that does voice recognition. I don't know if any of you know about that, but if you do, I would love to have more information. Because you can tell Eric has words that are pretty clear, but just a little bit hard to understand sometimes. So if those words could be encoded into a computer, he could just zap those words right out whenever. So how much, Jillian? How much time do we have?
Yes, we'd love to see the other.
All right, let's go ahead and watch that. But does anyone have anything else they want to ask Eric before we stop talking?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about what it's like to be a refugee in America?
Yep.
Maybe you don't want to know.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you,
Yep.
Kathi, and thank you, David.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you for having us. This was very, very special for us.
Thank you all.
Okay, hope to meet you all later.
With him is his mother and communication partner. And John and I and a number of other people in the room have worked together over the last year, traveling around Georgia as part of the Expanding Self-Advocacy Project. And John is a self-advocate with a lot of hope. That's what he said when I asked him about his introduction, that he has a lot of hope, and you'll hear that in his presentation. He has presented and encouraged self-advocates all over the state of Georgia now. He has been seen and heard, and he has shared his story and his journey, and he's helping other folks to be more active and to get involved and to share their stories and their journeys. And this morning, Beth English told us a quote that I wrote down because it was powerful and it reminded me of, or it prompted me about what John's going to talk about. And she said that stories have power and that they are the best way to put ideas in the world. So John's presentation today is about his story, and I know he's going to put ideas in this room that are going to impact us and is going to fit with the theme of moving away from exclusion. So, John and Joe.
Thanks, Katie. Today I'm going to talk about how communication influences our abilities to push back on segregated settings and build inclusive communities. I'm going to talk about my personal communication history and how I am working on building community. My experience is not tragic like those from Central State Hospital, mercifully, but it is isolation from my perspective. I have written this script for Joan to read. I'm 23 years old now, and I have only been able to communicate effectively for a short time. I am an autistic, non-reliable speaker. I cannot use my mouth to say what is in my brain. In fact, my brain does not do a very good job at controlling my body. Because my brain does not do what most brains do, I appear totally checked out. My mouth and throat make noises that mortify me. I cannot smile like others, though I am often happy and smiling inwardly. Not too long ago, I learned to do spelling, and I'll say more about that later. I've been in both segregated and inclusive environments. Not being able to communicate is its own form of isolation. For the first almost 20 years of my life, I had only behavior as a way to communicate. It was very frustrating. I always knew what people were saying. I could not respond with my voice. Sometimes I would throw things or bang my head, and sometimes I would bite or scream. I did this in both inclusive and segregated environments. I still have a lot of difficulty controlling my body, and I experience quite a bit of anxiety. And sometimes I still do these things, although they are becoming more infrequent. My communication through behavior was not and is not all negative. Even though I could pump a swing in my inclusive elementary school, I wanted friends, and so I just sat there and the kids pushed me. At home, when I wanted a certain toy, I would stand at the closet with my hands up. Later, as an adult, with still no means to communicate, when I wanted to learn to bake, I took the mixer out from under the counter. I often take the hand of someone or give a light arm rub to show affection. Imagine never being able to address any thought or emotion except in the most primitive of ways. Ways that were sometimes misunderstood. Like when my mom would say, "Do you want to go to the pool?" And my mouth would say over and over, "Pool, pool, pool." She thought I was in wholehearted agreement. But I wanted to say, hell no. There'll be a bunch of screaming kids there. Or those times when I'm making noises because I'm excited and people think I'm upset. Or when I would go up to my bed, my mom thought I was sleeping too much and would make me get up and come downstairs. But I needed to rest my brain. My mom tried many things to give me a voice. First, we tried PECS, Picture Exchange Communication System, where I would use pictures that I could take out of a binder and put on a strip of Velcro to say what I wanted. I was very little when I used PECS. And then, over time, we tried multiple Dynavox systems. These included keyboards that talked what you typed to complex pre-programmed picture systems. In an era of low tech, we tried something called Chat PC, a chunky handheld device that was yet another picture system. At one point, my mom consulted with someone at Syracuse University, and we tried facilitated communication and prompted typing. All of these relied on my motor, and my motor doesn't work. And there was no motor training for these, and we didn't understand why they didn't work. The world changed significantly for me in late 2014. That is when we found RPM, Rapid Prompting Method. RPM was developed by an Indian woman named Soma, who worked with her son Tito. My mom knew about RPM in the early 2000s when she saw a 60 Minutes episode on TV. An organization called CAN, Cure Autism Now, brought Soma and her son to the US. Soma was able to figure out how to replicate what was working for her son with other nonverbal autistics. In general, the theory goes like this. There's nothing wrong with the language center in the brain, it's the motor. A lot of autistic people have difficulty with their motor function, particularly fine motor. Speaking is the fine motor function of the language center of the brain. Because gross motor is easier to train than fine motor, a person learning RPM harnesses and trains the gross motor function of the shoulder and the arm to point to letters. Initially, I used a pencil and poked it through a stencil while doing lessons. Eventually, I moved to a laminated letterboard. I now use a keyboard when I'm answering questions during presentations or doing my email. Using a letterboard is faster and is less exhausting than the keyboard because a keyboard takes a lot more motor control. My day of freedom came on November 8, 2014, when my mom learned to use the letterboard. It was during an RPM therapeutic workshop over the weekend of November 8, 2014, that I attended with my mom and dad. The person running the workshop, Elizabeth Vossler, is a speech pathologist from Herndon, Virginia. Elizabeth started some lessons with me and then taught my mom what she, Elizabeth, had been doing during the workshop with me. Elizabeth started simply. She said what RPM was and then asked me to respond to a simple question to which she knew the answer. In my hand was a pencil. In hers was a stencil. She used gestures and her words to coax my body to do the next to impossible, to insert a pencil through the letters on the stencil. It was the hardest work I had ever done. Elizabeth and I worked intensely over 6 sessions during that workshop. As Elizabeth realized my control was getting a little better, she asked a question to which she did not know the answer. Tell me something you see in the sky. Somehow, I was able to get out what was in my head, the Big Dipper. It was then that I started to realize that my life was about to become a journey filled with more hope than I had ever dared to dream of. I hoped that I could go to school. I hoped that I could get some friends. I hoped that I could have a life just like everyone else. I call it my day of freedom because I was trapped. Not physically, like the people at Central State, but trapped in my head. Learning the letterboard freed me from being trapped in my head. I have freedom to have control over what happens to me. At this time, the spelling I do is only possible through a communication partner who has to be trained. The way to think about it is like a dance. To be a proficient dance team, both partners need to have a significant amount of training and practice, and need to practice together. That is just how it is with me and those who act as my communication partners. Because it is a long and intense process, I have few communication partners. While I can control my arm to communicate with a partner, I am still somewhat isolated. I continue to work hard on independent typing skills, but this may take years. Communicating only through behavior can often isolate someone more, but you can be included in an environment and alone in your thoughts, especially if you need prompts to get going and a partner to keep going. Imagine not being able to start a conversation without a prompt or a partner. Someone who knows the dance has to put a letterboard in my face and tell me to get started. I find the inability to initiate communication isolating at times and frustrating. I'm finding there's an isolation continuum related to communicating. The beginning of the continuum is when you have no way to communicate and you are totally segregated and isolated. Moving along the continuum, you can communicate through behavior, but you're still totally segregated. Then, while behavior is still your primary mode of communication, you can be partially or mostly included in your community. Continuing along, supported communication and being mostly included in the community are next. The goal, of course, is to be included and to be able to communicate freely. I'm a model for what's possible, and I'm still working on independence in my communication, and therefore still working on full inclusion in my community. My journey along this continuum goes like this. When I was very little, I was segregated because I couldn't talk, and I had no way aside from behavior to communicate. I was very little and mostly segregated from about 3 years old to about 10 years old. And I didn't know anything about inclusion. I knew that I did not like not being able to do the things all the kids at the school were doing. I used to bang my head on the window of the school bus while I watched the kids on the playground in the morning before the bell rang. I had to wait for the bell to ring before an aide would come get me off the bus. The kids in the autism classroom were not allowed to eat with or go to recess with other students, and the other kids made fun of us. At one point, a teacher made me wear a helmet on my head. I hated it. In 1997, IDEA, the law that guarantees the right to a free and appropriate public education, was reauthorized. And among other things, there was an increased emphasis on the participation of kids with disabilities in the general curriculum and the involvement of regular education teachers. I was able to get the opportunity to be with my peers and my brothers and sisters in my home school. I was included, even though I could not communicate. I could walk to school with my family and my neighbors. I was given access to a real science curriculum for the first time, and I made friends. I was invited to my very first birthday party when I was 11 years old. We moved to Georgia in 2007, and again I was segregated because I could not communicate. I moved back along that continuum. My mom was afraid that I would be abused and homeschooled me. I've already told you a little bit about November 2014, and that bumped me up on that continuum again. Now let me outline some of the ways my newfound ability to communicate has changed my life and the lives of others in my community. For me, the personal impact was felt almost immediately after open communication. By open communication, I mean where I am asked a question to which only I know the answer, and the answer could be anything. While using a letterboard, before you get to open communication, there is communication, but it comes through choices. I knew my mom could dance with me on open communication when she asked me one night at dinner what I wanted to talk about. I started with N-E-T-A-N, and then she stopped me and she asked me to try again. And so I started again. N-E-T-I-N, and then she stopped me again. So I started with N-E-T-E-N, and she stopped me again. And then she wrote it down. And then she said it out loud, Netan. And then she told me to finish. I was saying, Netanyahu is in the news. That's what I wanted to talk about. Along with some of the others who have found RPM as a way to learn and communicate, we formed a book club. Our recently acquired ability to communicate broadened our opportunities to participate in meaningful and age-appropriate activities. Then a chance came up for taking a class on the perimeter campus of Georgia State University. The class was a remote Duke University house course called Beyond Christian Intentions, colonialism, evangelism, and reconciliation in Native American communities. This was a 6-week course that ended with a group project. There was another class, physics. A retired physicist taught a University of Virginia course called How Things Work. At home, I was working on preparation to take the GED. Then I went to GED prep classes on the Gwinnett Technical College campus. Although the growth and changes were primarily personal, there was some greater impact on the whole community because I was being seen active in the community. Teachers, other students, and administrators on those college campuses saw me and the other autistic students as capable. Because I could communicate now, I was invited to speak to the Boy Scouts at our church. The Scouts got to appreciate me, the inner me. In answering their questions, I opened a door for them to also see other people with disabilities more clearly. My personal impact started to broaden out when I presented with Dorsey Elks during her Meaningful Day seminar, which some of you here have probably attended at one time or another. A group of professionals could now gain a similar view of my capabilities that the Boy Scouts could. Michelle Schwartz of Creative Consulting Services found me and asked me to speak to her staff of about 100 direct support professionals. Last week, I saw someone who works for Michelle who was at that presentation, and she said it was the best in-service training they've had. I've been able to have a positive impact on homeless families who have autistic kids by presenting a training for the staff at Drake House, a shelter in Roswell, Georgia for homeless single mothers. The circle of my influence was growing bigger. In terms of impact in the broader community, I vote, I email my legislators, and I was part of the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities Storytelling Project, which will hopefully influence all Georgia legislators as they come to understand how people with disabilities can benefit their communities and contribute to their communities. Additional statewide influence I am having is through Shanghai Unity Network self-advocacy planning sessions, where I am presenting my wheel power, which is a topic for another day. These sessions are expanding the influence of self-advocates throughout the state of Georgia, linking people with disabilities to one another and building a force for common good of people with disabilities and inclusive communities. Only in my wildest dreams did I think I would ever be paid to present. Given the proper communication tools and people who believe in you, anything is possible. I'm normalizing this communication method as well as the idea that someone with my set of challenges and my level of support need can be a valued contributor. I am mostly included with supported communication, and I'm only on this place on the continuum because I have work to communicate. I'm not finished with my work normalizing a place for people with serious challenges alongside of all people. My own journey is a microcosm. Again, I'm only a model. The world is starting to see me and appreciate what I have to offer. I can take your questions now.
thank you for your patience. So I want John to be able to respond to your questions. So.
First of all,
You may have
Katie and I
questions.
have done this connecting the keyboard how many times that we can absolutely never whip it out. I don't know why that is.
Questions?
Hi, John. I just wanted to ask you, with just all the struggles and challenges that you've been through, I would imagine at times you wanted to give up. What gave you hope to keep on going?
No. Where you go?
I'm a person of great faith. The Holy Spirit is always with me.
Other questions for John? Brittany and then Stacy.
Have you ever thought of, or are you in the process of doing any writing, like say writing a book?
Jen says, I am not a storyteller. It took me months to write that script.
Hi, John. Bill and I also, we talked when we first came to Georgia, and great job, Mom. But John, for you, not many of us can say we're paid public speakers, so congratulations on that one. What are your next steps? What are your plans for the future? What can we expect this great person.
Did you get more? You'll do that. Yeah. Why you doing? Yeah. No.
John says, I'm going to continue with Sun and hopefully facilitate some training here at UGA with Jillian and Tracy.
Someone have another question?
Any other?
David has a question. Eric has a question.
Okay, Eric has a question.
Hey John, Eric wanted to know how you started working, what steps you took.
It was purely by accident. My mom can give the long answer.
Takes a lot of energy to type all of it out. I was having a conversation with someone, actually is a friend of mine at the Georgia Advocacy Office, about John, and she knew he was presenting with the Boy Scouts and at our church for other things. He's presented for a lot of other things too. And she suggested that he approach Darcy Elks. Let's see a show of hands. How many people know who Darcy Elks is? Okay, so John approached Darcy and said that he wanted to help her during her Meaningful Day workshop. She said, great. And it was at Darcy's workshop that we ran into Katie and Michelle followed John out and said, hey, will you present to my staff? And John said, well, he spelled out, I would love to. And so then John went and presented to Michelle's staff, and he worked with Michelle a little bit on that presentation ahead of time, kind of what did she want, what was her expectations. And she said to John, hey, I need your help, and I'm gonna write for a grant, and if I get the grant, I'm gonna pay you. Of course, that's all that John heard, because he said, did she say she paid me? And I was like, I think so. But anyway, that's how it happened. I mean, it was Eric purely and totally by accident. It was, yeah. I think the word might be serendipitous. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Else have a question?
Okay. Renee?
Hi, John. Great job as always. Are you interested in other paid opportunities? And if anyone in this room wants to hire you, how can they get in touch with you?
I am, and I have my resume with me and some business cards. I did not ask Rayne to ask that. Okay, thank you, John.
There's a short film that Robin made with the folks from Fitzgerald, and we're going to show the film before they speak, just to introduce you to the whole story. But I wanted to, I guess, notice with you something I think we all feel, that we live in a time that really threatens to exclude or remove lots of people, and remove people from our social and civic membership in our communities. And what I feel when I hear the story of people from Ben Hill County is that we have seen this time in history before, and that we know what to do. We know how to roll up our sleeves, and we know how to talk to one another about our concerns and act together to build the kind of communities where everybody belongs. And that's what I believe People First and other citizens in Fitzgerald, Ben Hill County did. People First, as many of you may know, is a self-advocacy organization that started in Georgia in the 80s. Really changed, from my perspective, the conversation here in Georgia with self-advocates. From can we come join you to we're joining you and everyone else to build a better community. So I give you People First members of Georgia and other community members in Ben Hill County, and the film first before they speak. Beautiful, Robin, beautiful film, thank you. Well, the first person I'd like to introduce is Jill Alexander, right here, again, in the pink sweater. Jill grew up in Fitzgerald. She's a parent advocate and actively supports people to advocate for themselves. And Jill's going to respond to a couple of questions. How did citizens in Ben Hill County start mapping their assets and the needs in the community? And then what impact did People First members have when they showed up at county commission meetings?
Well, when we were looking at talking about transportation, the biggest thing that we did was have conversations, I think. Listening to people tell about what the needs were, but also giving space to listen to what people had to bring to the table. What were the resources that we could use to solve the problem and get transportation funded or carpooling, or there was dozens of ideas that were talked through. And so we had a lot of meetings everywhere around town, apartment complexes, the Housing Authority, Senior Citizens Center, and basically had a core group of people that were there and were showing up and were listening and were able to help us to create what's there now. But the asset mapping, we used it just left me. Mike Green's asset, yes, thank you. I was trying to think of the words for the acronym. But, and it was pivotal, really looking at what assets we have. Just, for example, we had a young lady who uses a wheelchair and really wanted to take her entrance exam for college, but couldn't get there. We didn't have accessible transportation for her as far as public transportation. She didn't have a vehicle. And at the time, I didn't have an accessible vehicle. But I started calling people. Who's got a van? Church has got vans. Who's got vans? The Jessamine place, Miss Shirley, and we figured out a way. That was the biggest thing. We didn't have to have everything in place to start figuring out how to make this work. But we did have to start having conversations and let the need be known and let people have a voice to say, this is what we need, and give people the opportunity to say, this is what I have to bring to the table. So as a matter of fact, she got to that test that day, took her entrance exam, and has gone on to college. So that's a success to me. So I would say that that's part of how we started mapping out our assets, was a lot of conversations. And then I think the other question was the impact People First made.
Had particularly on the county commission meetings, but any of the other conversations that you held as well. Yeah.
Well, I can't speak for it all because I would rather them speak to it, Marion and Sandra, but I will say this. Many voices bring a lot of power. And that's one thing we had, was a lot of voices. What do you guys think? I mean, how do you think that they responded when you showed up?
they was very interested on what we was interested in, what we was talking about. Because at first they thought that we was just talking about transportation for people with disabilities. But after they found out that we was doing it for the whole community, we had voices coming from everywhere.
Okay, well, let's, Marion and Sandra, let me introduce you and we can continue this. Marion is past president of People First of Georgia and a member.
Can you use the microphone?
Oh, I got this again. Marion is the past president of People First of Georgia, a member of Jessamine Place and has a son with a disability. And Sandra sitting next to her is a People First board member and a member of My Voice, My Participation, and My Board. And they're going to continue the conversation about the impact of People First members coming to county commission meetings, as well as talk about how did you prepare yourselves to go to those meetings and speak. And then the final piece I'd love you to talk about with everybody is what can you do now? Where can you go? With whom can you go on the bus that you couldn't go beforehand? I know you mentioned doctor's visits, but I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other variety of places that you're able to go.
Yeah, before we got the transportation, I had to walk around, walk to different places. Like if I need to go to the grocery store, I would walk there. Or like General Dollar, any other place, I would have to walk there before, we got this transportation thing started. It wasn't easy, but, I had to do it so to my best ability. So that was my only way of getting around is on my feet.
Left and right.
Left and right, yeah, left and right. My feet had to take me everywhere I needed to go, so.
And Marion?
People first seen what was going on in the community. So we first had to take on some leadership. And that was two stems from that leadership. We had it was to communicate and also to have self-determination. So we became self-determined and went out. We were determined that we was going to get transportation for our community.
One thing I can say about the People First organization is that I've learned from them how important, sometimes what they've taught me is to get out of the way. But People First operates as a self-advocacy group, and what they do, you guys, is just remarkable. And supporting them to make sure that they're able to attend the different meetings they need to attend, the trainings, all the statewide organizations they're members of, so that they can feel confident whenever they go out into the community, when they meet with government officials, so that they can speak up for themselves and say exactly what they need. I can talk about it as a provider. I'm sure Beth understands it. We can talk about it all day. But until they actually come to the meeting, come to the table, and express themselves, that's where the real impact happens. And that's when things get moving, and they get moving quickly.
So Shirley Brooks is the director of Jessamine Place, and I'm sorry, I forget this all the time. Shirley Brooks is the director of Jessamine Place, and I wonder, Shirley, if you could also speak to people in general in Ben Hill County. People you know, people you've noticed getting out and about on the bus. Give us some examples or some stories of people doing things that they couldn't do before because of the bus system.
Okay. First of all, Miss Julian, I want to thank you and thank Robin for the beautiful film and the setup for us, because this really came as quite a surprise to me about how much our involvement had been in actually setting up that transportation. I was present. I've been with the Jessamine Place for 24 years, but I've only been the director for a much shorter period of time. So the baton was passed to me after lots of the lead work on this project was done.
Jill is being extremely modest. She did all the legwork and getting the assessments and everything. But the role, what I have seen has been the results. And strangely enough, the results has just had a larger impact on the community at large than it has for the people that we actually support. Senior citizens who had a bus, picked them up at home, took them to the senior citizens place, the little center, and then took them back home. Now they're able to call the community transportation, and they can go anywhere they want to, whenever they want to. They're not just tied to going to one little place for 3 or 4 hours. And I've also noticed that folks who need to get out to the technical college, another surprising one, are parents who are utilizing the public transportation to get children to school whenever they have been suspended from the bus. So at least we're not denying people their education, you know what I'm saying? And it has surprised me. We used to see a transportation bus come through from Wilcox County. Never had one with Ben Hill County on it. And so to know that that bus system now is self-sustaining, which means that our government officials are happy because it's taking care of itself. And to know that another unexpected consequence was that one of our retired employees is now working and is one of the drivers on the bus. And so all that training she's got about human rights, dignity, and respect, she's using it for the people she's picking up. And it's just a wonderful thing to see that continue. But the economic impact that it's had on our community and the fact that it produced jobs for people in our community, retired people, and the fact that all aspects of the community are able to use that has been very rewarding for me. And to know that we played such a pivotal role in that, whether I inherited it or not, it's just a wonderful thing. But these ladies keep us on our toes. They make sure we know everything that's going on.
I'm scared to death of them.
So, yeah, Marion and Sandra, I want to shift it back to you to say some more about your involvement and other comments.
How did we get involved?
Yeah.
Well, how we get involved by advocating. Like she said, we was like talking with some people around in the community. You know, like our county commissioners, our city councilman, our city mayor. Then we had that big forum at the Grand Conference Center.
And who introduced you to those people?
Miss Jill.
Jill did? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Because at first, when I first met her, I didn't know who she was until I first met her, and then, you know, I got to know her real well.
Also, as people first being people first, we sat down, we had meetings about transportation. We had our very own meeting about transportation. And what we talked about that, you know, we didn't just want it for people with disabilities, we wanted it for the whole community. Yeah. And so we went out and started making suggestion boxes. And we put them around town to get everybody's suggestions. And they came in like hotcakes. So we just became a voice. We even went out in the country hard as well, because there's a lot of people out in on the edge of town that doesn't have any transportation. We went out and talked to them one-on-one, right? We wanted to know everybody's opinion and get names if we had to, write down names to take to whoever we had to take it to. So we done that, plus more.
I would like to say too that one of our cohorts is not here with us, Helen Johnson, who was the director immediately before I was. played a big role with Jill, hand in hand, as they did all of these assessments in the community and set up all these meetings, and I just don't want to leave her out of that because she did. But one of the things too that helped us was, and I hate to just, John O'Brien's book on Action to Make Community Building. I'm sure many people in this room have heard of it.
Say the title again, Shirley.
Action for Community Building by John O'Brien. And one of the things that he points out, and my understanding is the simple little things that we can do to start to build community, the social capital that we can build, and why we need to talk to each other. And we have gotten so disconnected as we got connected that we don't have face-to-face conversations anymore. And sometimes just breaking bread with people will open doors for you. And what these ladies have done is they've shown us that not only can we do it for people supported, but we also extended that quite purposely for our staff as well. And so we made a financial investment, not only in the people supported, but also in our staff to make sure that we have our fingers into every part of our community. And the reason we do that is not deliberately to get reciprocity, but to make sure that we are involved in all aspects of our community so that if and when we come knocking on the door with an issue, we've got someone that's going to answer that door that know we help them whenever they needed help. The Adjustment Place does not do any fundraising for our agency. And so that allows us even more integrity when it comes out, because these folks do everything from the Great Day of Service, communities in schools, the Christian Kitchen, Kiwanis, Rotary, Pilots Club, Family Connection. And so by getting involved in all of these things and representing our agency, what that does for us is give us an opportunity to speak to, what did you call them? The big people? The big people. We get a chance to, by being present, not just being present at the table, but actually participating in other community projects, so that something like this, whenever we get in the right position, the door is open and we're able to make things happen that we need to happen for all people in the community.
If I just can say this little bit, and I'm gonna shut up. But we want people to see us as people first. We are people too. So we want to give back to our community too. Our community has given us a lot of things. So it's our time to give back to our community. So if we want a better community, we got to get out there and work like everybody else.
And one more thing I would like to say is, now that we have this transit bus system going on now, we can use it more often, and we don't always have to depend on our support system to, take us where we need to go. We could get there on our own with, live independently.
Not just like you going to the doctors or going to the grocery store or anything like that. You can catch the transit and go visit your family. There's a lot of people that couldn't visit their family because they didn't have transportation. But now they have transportation and they go visit their family.
Or they can either go to school or to work whenever they need to.
Wow. That's great. That's great. Well, let's give Philip a chance to speak, and then we can open it up for questions. Philip J. III. Philip's family has been in Fitzgerald since 1895, and he is a Vietnam veteran and a Mercer University graduate. And he was chair of the Ben Hill County Commission from 2008 to 2012. So, Philip, if you'd comment on a couple of things, the piece you said at the last of the film, how do you help people learn to listen, create space, and feel responsible for what happens in that space, which is really a question and answer for leadership throughout this whole room. Everybody's a leader in their own way, in their own community. And also, what advice do you give for folks to get connected with the political power in their communities?
Okay, first I tell them to listen to Miss Brooks. John McKnight years ago, gave us a quote by Billie Holiday. And it had to do with the advice of, or kind of a way of working within the Salvation Army. Billie Holiday was a singer that quite a while back. She said, you gotta have something to eat and a little love in your life before you can hold still for anyone else's sermon on how to behave. And I think that considering the other person's position is critical to that. I surround myself with a lot of people in the South Georgia culture that they're tough. They and creating a context with rednecks and whatnot, or I'm not sure that y'all would survive those conversations. But it's, you know, you read a book like Hillbilly Elegy, and you realize the voice out there that hadn't been heard, and figuring out how to hear it, you know, once you've been insulted or whatnot, can be difficult. And I think that it's certainly a challenge. David Truan, somebody that a number of us in here would remember, told me that Philip was somebody who was happy with his karma. And I had to look up what karma meant. I'm still not sure I understand it, but I do feel like I've been placed in the right place. And to create that context, Sally, you will remember a fellow named Will Campbell. He was asked, because there is a Christian bond that's out there, that's real. He was asked to define Christianity in 8 words. He said, we're all bastards, and God loves us anyway. Once I can create that context, that, yeah, I'm a bastard and you are too, let's go from there. Then some listening can take place, and it takes care of that arrogance that a lot of times we have in trying to implement change. But to get people to listen, I listen, and I listen, and I listen, and I listen. There's an implicit deal in that. If you keep listening, sooner or later, they're going to say, what do you think? And there's your opening. I had made a commitment once I got out of political office and retired from it. It's a blood sport. I enjoyed it, but I was 10 years was enough. And I swore to myself I was never going to have. I simply wasn't going to argue anymore. An argument is a win and a lose, and there isn't any way around that. And being as some of the people that I associate myself are always right about everything that they say, it's hard not to create a difference. But I managed to do that in a couple of ways. I go to Bubba Hopkins' breakfast table several times a week. That's at Floyd's Restaurant, if any of y'all want to know. Now, some of those folks that are there, I remember when I was running for the commission, one of them said, now, y'all know we really don't need to be voting for Philip. Now, this is 12 years, or about 12 years ago now. Said, he's going to be having vans taking Negroes out to Walmart. Oh. Now, he didn't exactly use the word Negroes in there. I'm doing the best I can with that. So these days I'll say, now, how about them vans, Bubba? And there's an appreciation of that. Immigration was something that has been a big issue to listen to. The and you know, there are 7 other folks at Bubba's table. And by the way, it isn't Bubba Charles Hopkins, it's Bubba Hopkins. Bubba, anyway. I don't want Charles getting any letters or text or anything. The immigration thing is real. And the solutions that most of the people at that table had were draconian. I'm not even going to go through them because I'm ashamed I know folks that think that way. But the value of what I think I do, I call cognitive dissonance. In other words, I know I'm not going to persuade them, but if I can just get them to feel bad a little bit about whatever position they've taken, then to me that's a victory. And on the immigration, you know, I endure day after day after day of just literally being attacked by that. And but I kept waiting for my opening.
Now you got to understand, Fitzgerald is known for being a community of reconciliation.
And we are.
And we are.
But when you realize and get to the point where you realize that those voices, they are speaking out of fear, then you're getting somewhere. So, and I finally, and they'll talk with you about that individually, whereas they won't within the group. And the interesting thing, and I need one person came up to me and said, well, Phil, what do we do? You know, they've been told 7,000 people are coming. Well, I had written a little ad for the paper, and it said, I gave him this, and I said, is this who we are? And I'll read it. Like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at Southwatch Sunset Gate shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is imprisoned children. Her name is Mother of Elites. From her beacon hand glows wide world rejection. Her mild eyes command or close the airfield or air-bridged harbor that Twin Cities frame. Give us ancient land. I mean, y'all see reading this in Floyd's restaurant. I mean, that's kind of the truth too. But your story pumps. She with silent lips says, give me your vigorous, your wealthy, your cuddled, your glitterante, yearning to reign free, the richly endowed of your teeming shores. Send these, the accommodated, the fair weather, to me. I will lift my lamp beside the golden door. They got it. This particular person, didn't have enough. I mean, he couldn't respond other than I knew a little cognitive dissonance thing was working. And then I played the ace that I had down there. On the back of it, I had WWJD. What would Jesus do? That I'm absolutely certain that that person, that individual, and several others understand the issue in a much better way now. I think they were able to listen. And it was by waiting for the opening.
Yeah.
Before I put that in the paper, just to put the
Well, thank you. Waiting for the opening. Well, since we've got an opening now for a few minutes, I wonder if the audience would like to ask anyone, Philip, Shirley, Mary, and Sandra, Jill, questions, and they may have some more comments too about how they got connected to political power in their community, how they did what they did and continue to do it. So,
Just have one question for Ms. Shirley. I just wanted to know, are you guys, other than doing transportation, are you guys trying to do more for the community other than just transportation?
Oh, absolutely. I can express that by saying that all the different entities that we're involved in, we actually have people who run for political office. We have people on the Board of Education, County Commission.
Ms. Brooks is a school board member, she was chair. She don't play.
But we make contributions not only for the people that we serve in our agency, but we make sure that we have outstretched hands to reach everyone, every part of the community. And what I have discovered is that what is good for the population of the people that we serve generally turns out to be good for all people. And that was a kind of awakening for some of our government officials. Being on the school board has enabled me to also see and oversee the monitoring of our special need classes and our special need kids. And so it has been quite a learning and rewarding experience for me, but even more so, had an opportunity to make a difference. And that's the purpose of everything that we do, all the advocating that these ladies do.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you giving back to the community to make sure that they have what they need as far as transportation. I'm from a smaller city myself. We didn't have transportation for years, and we still don't. So I understand how it is to try to get back and forth on your feet, making sure where you need to go and get from your job. So I commend you for doing that, and I commend you all for trying to make sure that's done.
Thank you.
Someone else.
Mr. J is being extremely modest too. His role on the county commissioner played very heavily on convincing the other government officials, because one of the things we had to do was run a referendum to try to get the money to pay for it originally. And that 1 cent splosh that he initiated as the chairman of the county commissioner, he made sure that that transportation piece was put in there. But all the legwork that Jill had done to show the assessments and the need for it is what helped him be able to get the support he needed. And once we got the first 3 vans, 3 used vans, now our community has 6 vans. And so not only are they in Ben Hill County, but we're able to take people to Tiff County and surrounding areas. So,
Someone else, another question?
I'm from an even smaller town.
Smaller?
Athens, Georgia.
Oh,
Brooks
yeah.
County. And what I noticed about them, I've been here in Atlanta for about 10 years now. And there's not really much that had changed there. And you guys are making me homesick to go back home and do more. Because instead of bringing help to the low-income community projects, they build the projects closer to DFACs for their convenience. But the people still got to walk to the one grocery store guy, the one McDonald's that we just got last year. But you can put a DFAC and build around it, and these people are still catching a ride to get their kids to school. So at the end of this, I want to talk to you to see what I can do to help my hometown.
You know, it's hard to explain to a community where we have the expectation that everyone has a 2-car family in a garage, that there are other people out there. I was on the trike the other day, and the trike is along a one-way street, and we go around the trike, and I saw some people walking on the one-way street, and I heard them say, "They out here walking for fun. We have to walk." And I went, "Oh." And it just made me think that we still have some ways to go. Somebody asked what we're going to do next. I think we've got to communicate what is available to people. You know how sometimes in your own hometown you don't know about the resources that's in your town? And I'm sure they see the buses, but they may not know how to access it. And I think we've got a long ways to go to be able to make sure that everyone knows that it's there for their use.
Thank you. Is there another question? If not, we can take a 5-minute break before we go into our small group discussions. You have some questions on the table and a facilitator at each table to talk about your own communities. And we'll have some time right at the end of the program also for you to talk with the people from Fitzgerald more. But I'd like to give them a big hand for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. So we're going to have a small group discussion for about 30 minutes. And I thought to introduce this, you have some questions at the table. Your facilitators will give you an opportunity to talk together. But some of you may know of a man who writes little poems called Story People. Does anybody know these things? Brian Andreas. And one that I saw the other day that seemed to fit was maybe the real question to ask every day is, what kind of world do we want each other to live in? So enjoy your small group discussion, and then Beth will wrap up with comments, and then we'll have a reception. Oh, yes, and Gail, excuse me, Gail Bottoms, the very last part of our day is our poet, Gail Bottoms. Where's Gail? Here's Gail in the white jacket. Gail is going to read us some of her poems to conclude our day. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Joe, you remind me. So, the questions that we have.
So, as they say, without further ado, Beth, thank you for helping us wrap up.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, everyone. I have to go ahead and say, I told Shirley Brooks a few minutes ago that the first 2 pages of my notes she's already taken care of for me with that great presentation. And they really did talk a lot about some of the things that I think are really important. Call to action to me means 2 things. It means how do you build communities, and it means how do you do the political advocacy and the leadership that's needed to make sure communities are doing the right kinds of things. And so one of the things I always like to tell folks is think about yourself. We talk a lot about building circles of support around people who have disabilities. What does your circle, what does your personal circle look like? Who's there? What's there? Because if you don't have your own group of people around you, not necessarily to support you, but that you can engage with at a lot of different levels, how are you going to help build community for anybody else? So, again, story. As a child growing up in Tifton, Georgia, in the 60s and early 70s, I watched my parents engage in a lot of social, civic, and church activities. And I think that my daddy was probably president of the PTA in every single school I ever went to. But I did see the value in the relationships he built across those years because the community leaders asked him to chair a countywide school bond referendum. And so he was able to do some things as a result of having those connections. When I moved to Vienna, Georgia, which is a whopping 45 miles from my hometown, I'm not a very adventurous little girl, I got very involved in our local women's club and our church. And eventually, I've been in the club for 40 years now, but for the last 20 years, I've been the public policy chairman for the Georgia Federation of Women's Clubs. So what do you think is in our policies for the Georgia Federation, and what do you think that the women from Dunwoody to Brunswick to Columbus area to Valdosta work on when they work on legislative issues? They work on our issues too. So there's so many ways you can take the relationships and the organizations and the groups that you're a part of and engage them in what you do. When you think about it, 1 in 5 people have a disability. And so everybody has a connection. Everybody does. People ask me so many times, so how did you get involved in this? Without even talking about my great-grandfather, how did you get involved with this? And I said, I've always been involved in disability work. I can't tell you when I started. I can't tell you why I was interested. and why, it's just been something that's been really important to me. And now I look back, at 65 years old, I have a sister that has traumatic brain injury that was obviously acquired in adulthood. I have a almost 2-year-old grandchild who's been diagnosed with a very rare chromosome mutation, which creates a disability that will be lifelong. And so, as my son said, this child was born into the most well-prepared family that she could have been born into. And so, I think the things that you do, and where's Philip? It may be karma, you call it whatever you want to, but the things that you do prepare you for the things that you're going to do. And I also say that to say because as a result of my community activity, I was asked by some of the men in our community to run for city council. And I ran unopposed. I've run 6 times unopposed. I'm the only woman on the council. I don't know if that's good or bad. But it really has allowed me to use that platform to help with our issues. Accessibility is an issue for everybody. It's an issue for our older population. It's an issue for moms with strollers. So quality of life is something cities do. And so many times people say, well, why in the world did you serve as president of GMA, or why are you involved with the Municipal Association? Because that's where policy is made. That's where the quality of life issues are addressed. That's where your zoning comes in. That's where your adequate housing comes in. That's where your economic development that creates jobs so that everybody can work at a living wage. Those are the kinds of things that cities do. And with over 500 cities in Georgia, that organization can have a very powerful voice. And again, the question is, well, what does that got to do with disability? Well, one of the things that our Department of Behavioral Health has had major issues with over the last several years is the whole issue of zoning and housing adequacy and civil rights. And so we were able to work with the department and the Municipal Association attorneys and put together a very large training program that was attended by over 300 local elected officials to talk about those issues and to help local elected officials understand what the law says and understands the ramifications of violation of fair housing. And so there were so many ways that those two interests, if you will, could be combined for the greater good. And I'm just telling you that not to say that, I've gotten to do some fun things because they have been fun, but to tell you to look at ways that you can serve. Philip, as a county commissioner and on city council as well, and Shirley as a Board of Education member, there are countless committees that volunteers are needed. There are zoning boards, there are zoning appeals boards, there are Keep Whatever Your City Is Beautiful boards. There are a variety of opportunities for you to participate. They're always looking for volunteers. It gives you a different group of people to connect with that can help you as you tell your own story or the stories of the people that you care deeply about. So I would encourage you to do that, to look at who you already are surrounded by. Where are places that you could use your skills and talents and you could find a niche that can help you both personally, but also whatever cause you happen to be, happens to be near and dear to your heart. The other thing I would say to you is get to know, and again, Fitzgerald has done a beautiful job of that. If they can't get to know them, they just turn into their elected officials. So get to know those folks at every level. Find out what their interests are. Develop those relationships. Spend time. None of us in this room, I imagine, have the kind of major bucks that you can make a huge contribution to somebody's campaign. But you can make phone calls, you can send postcards, you can help with things if it's a candidate that you believe in what they espouse that they're going to support. Volunteer. I think that's a great way to do that. Know the issues. I can't tell you the times that a piece of legislation has come before our city council and also in front of the Georgia General Assembly where it sounds really good until you look at the unintended consequences that may result. So you have to really look at the issues, know both sides, and then support it or oppose it, and do it with data, but do it with stories. I had a very powerful state legislator tell me years ago. He says, Beth, some of us think with our hearts, some of us think with our heads, and so whatever you do, you need to be able to address both of those those people in the way they think. And so the stories are great, they get here. The data is great, it gets here. And sometimes you find the people that need some both. Another legislator was very wise and told a group of us this one time. He says, you've got the people that are for you, you got the people that are against you, and you got the people in the middle that hadn't figured out what they're going to do yet. Thank these people, hug them and love them. Don't waste your time on the ones that are definitely not going to be in your corner, and spend your time on those swing votes. Spend your time on the people who don't really know what they want to do, and you can probably persuade them to go your way. So, let's see, what did I not talk about? Oh, look for unexpected partners. Easter Seals and a lot of the disability groups and a lot of other people in a lot of other groups were involved several years ago with the Family Care Act. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it took us 6 years to pass the bill, but we passed it. We watched one very powerful chairman go from a heck no to speaking in favor of it in that 6-year process. But you know what happened? He had a family member that had something happen that changed his perspective, and the story was different. The story was different. So sometimes it takes a lot of determination, it takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness. I don't know if that's a word or not, but it is today. And sometimes it just takes those unlikely partners. We partnered with the AARP, there was PTA, there was some union groups, there was the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta, it was just a very, very diverse group of about 70 organizations who never have worked together on anything but this bill. And it passed. And it passed overwhelmingly. And it had bipartisan support. And then the other thing I would say to you, and everybody has said this to you today, is tell your story. Tell your story. There's so many compelling stories. Oh my gosh, I was moved to tears so many times today because of the stories and the life experiences of people. I can never come away from one of these without feeling very inspired. And I think that is one of the beauties of this particular symposium. So tell your stories. And finally, which is the one I think Mark Johnson wanted me to say if I don't say anything else today, is vote.
Democrats.
Everybody in this room has influence because everybody in this room has a vote. And if you don't believe that, you should talk to my former mayor, Willie Davis. Mr. Davis won an election 30 years ago with one vote. After the recount, it was one vote. He served as our first African American mayor. He served for 20 years, unopposed most of that time. So one vote counts. And finally, the very last thing I would tell you is run for office. It's not rocket science. If Philip and I can do it, anybody in this room can do it. Make a difference. Take your agenda to the table. You don't have to wait for somebody else to adopt your agenda. Take your agenda. I told you earlier, historic preservation was one of my little things, or history. We have a beautiful old historic downtown in Vienna, Georgia, and some of the buildings were being torn down, and it was just horrible. And so one of the first things I did as city council member was to pass a historic preservation ordinance, and it took an act of Congress because there were people out there going, we don't want you controlling what we do with our property, blah, 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 blah. Well, finally, we convinced everybody it was okay, and after it passed, someone bought this beautiful old historic Victorian home and painted it lavender. And we started getting the phone calls. How dare you? I thought we had a historic preservation ordinance. Why are those people painting their house purple? We said, we told you we weren't going to tell you what color to paint the house. So sometimes you just have to bring your own agenda to the table and be okay with getting, some feedback that's maybe not so positive. I told y'all earlier I'm a paper person. I'm also a write it on a napkin if I have one handy and I see something great. So I want to end with this quote, and I really liked it. I found it this morning when I was reading. It says, our titles and labels do not matter much. In the end, it's not about saying who we are. What matters is showing who we are. Thank you so much.
With Zoe Stoneman, Director of IHDD, who's going to introduce Gail Bottoms, our poet.
I hope that everyone has enjoyed the day-to-day as much as I have. I found it incredibly powerful. And I'm delighted to be in the position of introducing someone who's been a friend of mine for, we won't say how many years for Gail, we won't go there, for a few years. Gail is past president of People First of Georgia. She has given keynote addresses in many states across the country. She has advocated for people's rights and people's needs through talking to other advocates, talking to groups, talking to state legislators, talking to federal legislators, and has made an incredible difference. And Gail is a poet. Gail writes beautiful poetry that tells her story in a very, very lovely way. And that's how we're going to end this day today. Gail also at the after she reads her poems, if any of you are interested in purchasing a copy of Gail's current book, she will be making that available. And she also will be taking orders for an upcoming book of poetry. And our institute is fortunate enough to be able to work with Gail to basically make her poems available to people. So let me just introduce a good friend and an absolutely wonderful person, Gail Bottles.
Whitney's gonna help me. My first poem was a poem I wrote about Elaine and Lois, you know, the people that got out of the institution. And here's my poem. To Elaine and Lois, there were two women, Elaine and Lois, in an institution that wasn't their choice. They wanted out, so they used their voice. To make a difference was their plan, to help themselves and their fellow man. They hired the lawyers who said we can, and went to fight their fugitive plan. Elaine and Lois went through a big fight to set folks straight and put things right, to tell institutions to go fly a kite. To live in a community is a God-given right. They convinced the judge that they could live on their own, make their own choices and have their own home. Thanks, Lois. Thanks, Elaine. Your action has made it even more plain. Stand up for yourself, a self-advocate be. There is nothing to lose and everything to gain. So tonight we honor you both for what you have done. You fought the system, and thank God you won. My next poem is Listen. And my friend Carolyn, sees my ring. She said, you know, Gail, you need this ring when you do that, so when you go, everybody see your ring. So she let me borrow her ring. I'm a human being too. I have feelings just like you. I have needs and hopes and dreams, not high as yours it seems, but no less important to me, you see. So to you I make my plea. Don't skip my dreams, listen to me. I have gifts that are God-given. To get to use them to me is living. Give me a chance, see what I can do. I have dreams just like you. And this poem is Finding the Way. Finding the Way. Don't notice my handshake. It's shaking a little bit. But Finding the Way is this poem. I just wrote this a couple of days ago. Everyone has a different path then, even though
we will with the same way of birth begin. We are different and special, my friend. No one of us is the same. We are one of a kind then. Each of us have weaknesses and strengths of body and mind. Some can't walk, some are blind, some have limitations in health, illnesses of some kind. But God gave us all the essential. He gave us each potential. We are all put here for a purpose. We all have something to do. God has a path for us to walk, a plan for me and you. We must seek Him and let Him guide us each day so we can find His purpose for us then, so we can find the way, my friend. And this is going to be in my new book at University of Georgia. Whitney and Becky and Zoe and all of them helping me. But Whitney designed it, and man, it's so beautiful. And Robin did the photography, and I cried when I saw, you could just buy it for the photography. And Whitney did a beautiful job designing it. She's a graphic designer. And I didn't know what that meant till I saw what she did with what I wrote. That is awesome. But this is my book, my new book. And this is the title of my new book. And you know what she done? She put my picture on the front of the book. I said, now, Whitney, I said, it ought to be on the last page or on the second page, not on the front. And I said, nobody will buy it. She said, yes, they will, Gail. They'll buy it, even if your picture's on the front. But, you know what? A lot of people, I'll tell y'all this. I hope y'all don't take it the wrong way. But this is what I read in a book. I read, this person said, you know, when you say you talk to God, people call that prayer. But when you say God talks to you, they say that's schizophrenia. But you know what? God talks to me. And I told Whitney, I said, you know, poems don't come from me. They come through me. And I don't understand it myself, but poems come through me. And so this is my poem, the title of my new book. When you see me, what do you see? Do you see my disability, or do you see me? Does my disability make me seem less in your eyes? I do not measure up, so your interest dies. Listen, I have other abilities, my friend, it's so. You may not see them when you look, but if you get to know me, if the time you took, your opinion of me would surely rise, and admiration would show in your eyes. And while I'm up here, I want to thank the University of Georgia, HTD, all the people that have supported me through the years. You know, I'll be 75 in November. This is November.
Happy birthday.
November the 24th. I'll be 75. And down through these years, I've had people to support me and love me. And I want to tell y'all all, and my friends in People First, and all those that work with People First, and I'm just thankful. I'm thankful to God. I'm thankful to the UGA, IHTD, And I'm thankful to all of y'all.
Well, thank you, Gail. Isn't she wonderful, guys? She's wonderful. Well, she has just been a treasure to my life, and I'm just glad to know her. Her books will be right outside of the registration table. Her book number 1 is on sale for $20, and then pre-order for her second book, When You See Me, is you just pre-order it outside the door. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Please enjoy the reception and a tour if you like. Thank you. I think there might be.